Okay, hey guys. Today we are having our fourth general meeting today, and today's meeting is going to be about safety. So, hi, I'm your safety captain, Chris Thomas, and we're going to be going over the general safety rules. So, obviously, today we're going over the first robotics safety rules and guidelines. And these are covering safety guidelines during the competition, but also outside the competition. And by outside, I mean when we're doing any type of work on the robot. Okay? So, who do these rules apply to? So, some people might say, okay, it only applies to team members. But actually, the rules apply to everyone. So, not just team members, but also team captains, any teachers or supervisors we have, and onlookers that are near the robot. Everyone has to be following safety rules whenever they're near the robot or working on the robot. So, now we get to general safety rules. So, the general safety rules include no horseplaying or fooling around. We don't want you running around, playing with your friends and falling or breaking something because it's never good. We want you to follow safe working practices. So this is wearing PPE, using your tools correctly, and everything else that's included in safe working practices. We don't want you to disregard safety. So don't show up thinking you know everything and then believing you're not required to wear goggles or gloves or such just because you're an expert at a tool. We want you to always have a healthy attitude about safety and always follow the proper guidelines no matter how skilled you are. Always walk and don't run. You don't know what's on the floor. You can trip or you can slip. And you want to make sure the environment around you is controlled so you know everything that's going on. Be careful when working on things above normal height. We don't want things falling from above your head and into your face or hitting your eyes, which is why we wear goggles, of course. Be careful around rapidly spinning objects. So these are things like saws or drills, and you want to make sure nothing that you're wearing can catch onto them as well, because that can be very dangerous. We want to be careful around hot things, because obviously if they're hot, you're going to get burned. And make sure you use ladders and step stools properly. We don't want you stepping onto the wrong steps and having the ladder break or you falling. So next up, we have rules on stored energy. So these include electrical, pneumatic, and miscellaneous. So of course, we all know what electrical is. Pneumatic is including pistons and such, anything having to do with compressed air. And miscellaneous, these are things such as potential energy of springs or height, such as a raised object that could fall from somewhere. So for electrical, make sure when you're working with your electrical sources that you disconnect any power sources. So when you're working on your robot, you want to fully power it down, de-energize it just so you don't electrocute yourself. For pneumatic energy sources, you want to make sure you vent any compressed air, and you want to make sure any pressure gauges indicate zero while you're working on it. And for miscellaneous types of energy, make sure any compressed or stretched springs or tubes are revealed of such pressure. And you want to make sure you lower all raised robot arms or devices that could possibly drop down onto your hand or break themselves when dropping. So next up we have hand tools. So for those of you who don't know what hand tools are, these are anything that you use with your hands, not just like hammers and screwdrivers, but also drills and such as well. So when you're using hand tools, you want to make sure you use them properly and for the right job. We don't want you hammering things with screwdrivers and such. And make sure you check the condition of tools before use every single time. You want to make sure it's not dull, defective, or broken. And if you find that they are, make sure to notify someone and remove them from service. Don't just get lazy and put it back on the shelf because you don't know where to put it. Make sure the object that you're modifying is on a steady surface. You don't want it moving around and you can cut yourself. And make sure when you're using sharp objects or tools, you point it away from yourself and that you're aware of anyone else around you. When stowing away objects, we want to make sure you put them in the proper place and make sure wherever you put it, it doesn't cause a safety hazard for anyone who's walking by. Generally, this would mean talking to John about it because John, our one of our sub captains, is in charge of the closet. So you want to make sure you talk to him before putting things away. So okay, so next up we have mechanical guards, and for those of you who don't know, mechanical guards are the protective equipment on larger pieces of equipment. So these are our bandsaws, our drill presses, and anything of the sort. And generally, these will all have these mechanical guards. And because of this, this is why we can use them. You want to make sure that you don't use any type of equipment of this sort without its proper mechanical guards. And if you find any equipment being used, you want to make sure you notify me or a teacher and make sure that it's put out of service. Don't go using it just because there's nothing else. We want to make sure that these equipments are taken out of service until they're repaired because without proper safety equipment and mechanical guards, it can pose a safety hazard. So now we have respect electricity. So for those of you who don't know, I know there's some crazy kids out there sticking forks in outlets and such. We don't want any of those types of children. So for respect electricity, though this mainly applies to the electrical group, it also applies to kids in mechanical as well. So don't think you're not in electrical, it doesn't apply. So when you're using wires or cords, you want to make sure you check the conditions of the wires and cords that are being used. And you want to make sure you don't daisy chain your outlets. So basically, daisy chaining means plugging power strips into another power strip. And this can cause the power strips to overload from too much electricity being used and potentially cause a fire. So along these lines, things you want to avoid are extension cords extension cords into power strips, and multi-device receptacles being plugged into either a power strip or extension cord. Okay, so now we're on to battery safety. And I know we use batteries every day, but the batteries that we use in robotics are much more powerful and along those lines, much more dangerous. So, for those of you who don't know, batteries contain acid. This substance, which is H2SO4, is a corrosive colorless liquid that will burn your eyes, skin, and clothing. So, don't take chances if batteries seem damaged or unstable. Stored energy could cause the battery to rapidly heat up and potentially explode. And the 12-volt batteries that First gives us in our starter kit contain sulfuric acid that will burn human tissue on contact. So, of course, we want to avoid them, but in the case that we have an accident with a battery, make sure you immediately flush any contacted skin with lots of water and seek medical treatment by notifying a teacher or me, your safety captain. So, continuing on with battery safety, if a battery spill occurs, as we just said, notify the safety captain, which is myself, Chris Thomas. Don't try to clean with conventional methods because, paper towels aren't going to work on the chemicals, even if you think it will. And water probably won't as well. We have proper kits for this, so make sure you contact us or me or a teacher when trying to clean one of these up. And seek medical attention if you come into contact with the liquid. So at a first event, it's slightly different. You want to make sure you send anyone in contact with the spill to first aid or EMTs. They have a booth that would be there for any accidents of the sort. So you want to make sure that happens. And you want to report the incident to the pit administration supervisor because they have paperwork that has to do with battery spills or accidents of the sort. When using batteries, you want to make sure battery charging terminals are used optimally. So this includes giving proper ventilation, making sure they are not short circuited, because this could potentially cause a battery explosion. And you don't want to charge batteries at a greater rate than the recommended rate. So batteries aren't the only problem. You want to make sure their battery charging terminals are always working fine as well. So make sure you periodically inspect not just the batteries, but the terminals. So that's all for battery safety. Now we go on to chemical safety. So not just the chemicals coming from batteries, but we use other chemicals as well. So you want to make sure when we're using chemicals, that all chemical containers are in good condition and that they're properly labeled by the proper manufacturers. Uh, Labels would tell us the different parts of the chemicals, possible warnings, and how to treat them. So you want to make sure that the labels say everything that we need to know. So if exposed to chemicals, immediately notify me or a teacher. And in terms of storing chemicals, make sure we store all chemicals properly and safely because we don't want them spilling out, even if they drop, because we they're much more dangerous than just water. Don't you We can't use any highly flammable chemicals at first events as well. Just a rule that they have. So on to soldering. Soldering is mainly for the electrical group, but of course, like we just said with the electrical section, this is necessary to know for the mechanical as well and anyone around because soldering is very dangerous and it gives off basically poisonous gases, which is why the people working on them will be wearing masks. So you want to make sure you use lead-free solder, and you want to make sure that you're using an electrically heated soldering gun only. No torches or open flames are allowed at the competitions. And when soldering, you want to make sure you wear proper eye and face protection. You want to make sure you solder in well-ventilated areas and never touch the solder. Wear cotton clothing to prevent burns, and always wash hands after working with solder as well. You want to work on fire-resistant surfaces just because of the hot temperatures, and you want to be mindful of where soldering equipment is being placed when not being used, because you don't want someone passing by, knocking into it, and then burning themselves, because these things are very hot, to say the least. Okay, so now we're on to PPE. So, just as a general note, all equipment must be certified properly for us to be using them. So onwards, we have eye and face protection. So for eye and face protection, this includes safety goggles, side shields, and face shields. So when should we wear eye and face protection? You want to wear eye and face protection whenever we're working on the robot. And this is basically all the time. If when in doubt, you usually want to wear safety goggles. Risk of You want to make sure you wear safety goggles because of risk of exposure to flying particles or chemical exposure. And at first events, you have to wear them anywhere in the pit station, arena vicinity, practice fields, and in specific areas that are designated with signs to wear safety goggles. And for those people who have glasses, you can wear safety goggles over them, or I guess you have to wear safety goggles over them. The only scenario where this would be that you wouldn't have to is if you have safety certified glasses, and in those cases, you just need side shields for your glasses. But yeah, so on to hand protection. Hand protection is the proper tool guards and gloves. And gloves depend on the application. I know a lot of people just think, let's grab a pair of gloves, but each glove can be used for something different. So, example, when you're using chemical resistant gloves, you want to make sure it's if you're working with chemicals and not if you're working with a hammer of the sort. So, use common sense. So, going back over this hand, hearing, and foot protection. So, this is just a slight review. But hand protection, we just said gloves. And you want to make sure for hearing, you use proper hearing protection. So this is basically when there are high sound levels that could be damaging to the ears. And hearing protection includes earplugs, headphones, and the sort. And high sound levels could be possibly when a saw is on because the screeching sound from the metal is rather annoying and could be damaging to your ears just because of the high frequencies. For foot protection, you want to make sure you always wear closed-toed shoes. Uh, in some cases, safety shoes or toe guards could be appropriate if you're working with something that could possibly fall into your feet. And for guidelines, these guidelines apply to both participants and spectators at events. So not just people working on the robot, but anyone watching as well. So can't be walking in with flip-flops. So this is just another review of foot protection. You can skip it. And yeah, so general clothing guidelines. This is basically what we see in our tech classes. You want to make sure you tie your hair back, remove any jewelry that could be hanging, and you don't want to wear loose clothing such as sweatshirts or baggy shirts because the dangers of this could be your hair or loose clothing or jewelry could be caught up in a spinning machine and you could be pulled into the machine and get injured. So we don't want that happening. So next up we have lifting and handling the robot. So generally this is whenever we're moving the robot, if you couldn't tell. And in terms of the competition, this would be out of the pit to the competition site and from the competition site to the pit. So for robot carts are generally what we use to move the robot. And basically, we can make them, but you can also buy them. And when making the robot cart, you want to make sure you follow the proper guidelines. And this means the robot cart must remain in pit when not in use. You want to make sure it fits through a standard 30-inch door. The wheels can't damage the floor. No extra noises made by the cart unless for safety purposes, and the team number must be on the cart. So these are just like general guidelines for when we're making the cart ourselves, basically. So for how to lift the robot, there are actually specific guidelines on how to do this properly. So before you lift, you want to make sure everyone lifting the robot has the proper PPE. So this is goggles and in certain cases gloves. You want to make sure you have a proper path to move the robot, and you want to make sure all the parts on the robot are secure and the robot is safe to move. So you want to make sure the robot is off and anything that's being extended, such as an arm or such, is unextended so that it can't, drop down and hit somebody. Okay, so now we get to the actual lift itself. So first of all, you want to make sure someone coordinates the lift so everyone can lift together. And so when you lift the robot, you want to lift at the same time with proper body mechanics. Lift with your legs, making sure that your back is straight. Don't twist your body. Use proper handholds. You want to bend at the knees at the proper angle, tighten your stomach muscles during the lift, and make sure you keep the robot close to your body. Make sure the cart is stable so that when you're lifting the robot, you have a proper place to put it and it's not going to like move around, basically. Common sense, guys. So, transporting procedures, you want to make sure the robot is stable on the cart and we don't want it sliding off. And you want to make sure the cart is controlled and properly maneuvered. Don't be in a rush. Patience is key, guys. This is like the tortoise in the hare for those of you who don't know. But basically, you want to make sure you're not hitting people, you're not accidentally running into people. So, no need to run to places. You want to make sure the cart doesn't roll away when we're not using it or pose a hazard to others in the vicinity. So, post match procedures. This is after we finish our match. We want to relieve all stored energy. So, as we just said, you want to turn off the robot, uh, turn off any batteries, and relieve any pneumatic pressure. This is the whole relieve any pressure or potential energy before working on the robot idea. And then once you've made sure the robot's set, you can refer to the how to lift your robot on lifting the robot. And basically, you'll just put it back into the cart and we'll take it back to the pit. And before we leave, you want to make sure you remove any debris from the playing field that fell off the robot or other robots. Just common courtesy, guys, for other people who are coming onto the stage afterwards. So now safety during first events. So these are specifically rules for the first events, whereas all of the other ones were general safety concerns. So general safety considerations, of course, you want to wear proper PPE. You want to follow the proper lifting and handling procedures for the robot. Skateboards, drones, and the sort aren't allowed at events, so you're not allowed to bring them, guys. And make sure you don't throw objects from the stand. So this is basically like paper airplanes or things. Why you would do so, I don't know, but yeah. So competition safety, you want to make sure you use the buddy system when traveling. Don't travel alone because we don't know everybody there. You don't know what's going to happen. All first staff have name badges to distinguish them. So you can properly tell whoever is an actual first staff. You want to make sure you stay aware of your surroundings, and you want to always follow safety guidelines, even during matches or in the heat of the competition. So I know we're always like rushing from the pit and back and forth, and we're like eager to like fix the robot up if we find we have any mistakes or like any changes to make. But make sure you're still following the guidelines for safety because it's especially in those times that we get injured. And also at the competition, make sure you help other teams that you see having safety issues. So if you see like someone on the other team not wearing goggles, maybe point it out to them, of course, politely, guys. But yeah, just try to be considerate to others as well. Okay, so pit safety. So first of all, this is the setup. So when we come in, we have to set up our pit, and we have to make sure, of course, that we follow proper safety procedures when handling equipment and setting up. So there is a 10-foot limit on the station. This is basically to make sure we're not working on things too high that could potentially be dangerous. And this includes when we're hanging up banners as well. Make sure you use ladders. We don't want you climbing on things like chairs, tables, or boxes, guys. And it just so happens that small benchtop bandsaws or drill presses are allowed, as long as we have the proper safety guards, as we said before. So now this is general pit safety. So following setup, this is during the general competition and afterwards. You want to make sure we control access to the pit station. We don't want just anyone walking in. And we want to keep our areas neat and orderly. We want to keep the aisle outside the station unobstructed for pedestrians and robots as well. We don't want them, like, being hindered by our disorderly conduct. And we want to follow proper safety guidelines for work on the robot. Be aware of your neighbors, and neighbors would be any of the teams working next to us or across from us, because we don't want them accidentally like doing things in their pit and actually accidentally injuring us or vice versa. And make sure afterwards that we properly clear the pit when we're leaving. So this includes properly storing our tools and batteries and cleaning the floor in and around the station. So yeah. So finishing up, we have the Team Safety Award. So basically, the Safety Award is sponsored by UL, and it celebrates the team that progresses beyond safety fundamentals by using innovative ways to eliminate or protect against hazards for themselves and others. So basically, the way they judge this is they have judges or safety advisors that will focus on team safety behaviors, and they'll basically be observing us the entire time during the competition. And they'll be watching how we conduct our safety and how we help other teams as well. So this is outreach to other teams in the general vicinity. So like we said, if someone's not wearing goggles from another team, reach out to them. And basically team members will be asked by judges or safety advisors to explain the team's safety practices. So everybody has to be informed about how our safety works at school and at competitions and what we do on our team. So, finishing up, just a reminder, guys, you want to make sure if you haven't done so, you sign into the official team roster, you sign the policy sheet, uh, you get the student parent info Google form filled out, and you ask your parents whether or not they can be a mentor, because, of course, we're always open to having people help out with our robotics, and any experience is welcome from a parent or mentor. So, for those of you on the Google Classroom, everything is available. But yeah, see everybody on Monday, 2:30 p.m. for our next meeting. And thanks for being here, guys.